Well, Henshaw here again, from domestic terrorist headquarters, which is what they think of us. And I'm half joking when I say that. I'll tell you more about when you get my materials. I'll show you exactly what they think. But that said, subject matter for today, and some of you may have seen this even as far away as the East Coast, is the Greater Idaho movement. And that involves a lot of counties, especially from eastern Oregon, that comprise, a big part of the state, at least geographically, wanting to disassociate themselves with Oregon and join Idaho. An astounding thought when one thinks about it, but much more realistic than I think even most of the advocates understand about what it is they're trying to do. And the reason, as in so many states, is that they simply say we don't have enough representation in the quote unquote state government. Of course, the big problem there is that there isn't a state government to start out with. No states remaining that were admitted into this union, Article 4, Section 3. More to the point here, potentially, is there's nothing remotely resembling a racial representation, especially in the legislatures. And we have a real problem with that in California. And you start out with, you look up under Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution of the United States, and it sets the maximum ratio of inhabitants to representatives 30,000 to 1. Hasn't been changed, hasn't been modified, hasn't been repealed. 30,000. What do we have today in the House? 438. What should we have, assuming arguendo, the accurate number for inhabitants would be the about 325 million people we have right now. Oh, are you ready for this one? Try 11,200. And as I've suggested on past occasions, and with a little humor, in order to house people in the facility big enough so they could meet all at one time, the government here might want to rent out, say the Kremlin in the Soviet Union or Tiananmen Square, in China. And it would make sense, especially if we're going to be operating on National Socialist principles anyway, or communist principles. I mean, it makes sense to meet in a nation like that understands very well what it is that's going on. Not like it is here. And my gosh, I'm old enough that I don't have a vivid recollection of it, but the House Un-American Activities Committee, was going out there and going after people that belong to the Communist Party, even in a time when it wasn't illegal to do it. But that's how bad they thought that was, and yet here we have the FDR New Deal, and what are they practicing? Socialism, if not national socialism. So go figure. In any case, a lot of these counties are taking this seriously, and at first blush, one might think for any county to attempt to do that independently or even with a lot of other counties, there's going to be some big violations involved with the state constitution now, isn't there? Not if I'm right and there are no states. If we're talking about at one and the same time the territory of Oregon and the territory of Idaho, what's the big deal? Just some geographic line drawing, to set out the new boundaries of the territories of Idaho and Oregon, and wherever else this might occur. And like I say, California in particular, you could see a lot of counties breaking off to join Nevada or Arizona, as the case may be, for the same reason. But my gosh, here, we have over 40 million Californians and 80 members in the California Assembly. That's 500,000 to 1. And even if the ratio of representation was triple what's called for in the U.S. Constitution, let's call it 100,000 for a nice round number. So 100,000 for every million, you have 10. And for every 10 million, you have, 100. And you would have to have over 400 members of the assembly to have a lawful quorum to do business and a lawful racial representation in Sacramento. They don't have it. And a lot of things, if that changes, a lot of things change because what happens? Now you're going to have a lot more people in there. The districts they represent will be a lot smaller. making it easier for people like you and I to run for office and not be beholden to major political parties and have to toe the party line once we get our ass, quote unquote, elected. Then with the smaller, much smaller amount of constituents, it's much easier to respond to those that want to instruct their representatives on what they want to see done and explain to them with attitude and with authority why we're right and you're wrong. So there's a lot to be said for this, and this would be a much closer to a Republican form of government than what the hell we have now, especially in California. But you can make the argument, I think, for just about every quote unquote state in this nation doesn't have one, and for a variety of reasons. That's just one incident where they don't have it. Oh, that's Article 4, Section 4, by the way. And note, this is another one of those sections of the Constitution, and you look at, I've got a U.S. Code annotated from 1952, put out by the Government Printing Office, and it's one of my best reference books. And you go in there and they have the Constitution broken down by sections, and you can go in and read the section and the developments and see what went on and see any court cases that have been decided. Article 4, Section 4. Keep in mind, we've been here 230 years, right? What do we have? One case. Luther v. Borden in 1843, where the 9 parts in effect there ruled that it was a political question. Might have been true then. It's not now. Because we did have states then, admitted into this union. We did have something a lot more reminiscent of a Republican form of government in Washington, D.C. and in the states. And maybe on the facts of that case, that was the Dorr Rebellion back in the 1840s, you could make a claim like that. Now you can't. And for a variety of reasons, these are the kind of issues you start bringing them up. And you'll learn, by the way, by ordering my materials, very modestly priced. Send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. And you start raising issues like Article 4, Section 4, Republican form of government. 9th Article of Amendment, also ruled on only one time, and that didn't happen until 1965, for crying out loud. I want to say Griswold v. Connecticut. I might not be right about that, but Connecticut was involved. And it was a case where the state wanted to come into your bedroom as a married couple and tell you couldn't use birth control. And about which more later, that's getting to be an increasingly interesting subject. But that said, one case. You're telling me people were so stupid, especially in the 19th century, that they didn't know this? Or that the legislatures adhere much more closely to their oaths of office to be bound by this Constitution and the laws enacted in pursuance thereof? But it all disappeared like a fart in the wind with the quote-unquote ratification of the non-existent 14th War Amendment. More cause and effect that the people that ratified the amendment, assuming they had the power to do it, and they didn't know. So you get them before the jury. The first question I ask the jury is, where's the consent of the governed here? I don't see it. They think they can do everything these days by, administrative hearings and this, that, and the other. The hell with the jury. They can force you into arbitration and a lot of other bullshit that goes along with this just a system. And yet we have the right to trial by jury, which is secured to inhabitants of territories, for crying out loud. Article 2 of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is reenacted by the first Congress, yet nowhere in sight, especially in California. And not only that, but the 9 parts have ruled that there's no right to a trial by jury in any misdemeanor case. Case called Blanton v. Las Vegas, 489 U.S. 538. So simple of a unanimous opinion that even let Thurgood Marshall write it. No right to trial by jury in a misdemeanor case. And if the question gets there, quote unquote, squarely there, which it hasn't been, there's every reason to think, or up until very recently there was, that they would rule no right to trial by jury in a felony case. Recent goings on tell me much different. But I'm so far ahead of the curve here, the 5 decades I have of intense, passionate, and independent research of my subject matter. I don't think they would rule that now, and they might have done that even in the last term. But events going on with this COVID crap, the Biden core packing plan, the massive debt crap they're putting in now with the $6 trillion proposal to go into debt to get around all the BS. COVID stuff they artificially created themselves. And the courts got their backs up for the first time in 150 years, because if they can come in and make changes like they're proposing to do, even by statute, let alone executive order by Biden asking as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, then the Supreme Court isn't a judicial court. And that means there are none. And that means there's no constitution, there are no peaceful remedies. What do you suppose is going to happen when enough people recognize that reality? And it is what it is. And these are the conversations I know they're having in the back halls there with the justices, trying to figure out the best way to get us back on track here. And I'm convinced this court is capable of doing it. And maybe even if Biden succeeds with the court packing plan, because the justices that get on there are going to get taken in the back and say, wait a minute, we know you're here and we know what your philosophical outlook is, but you're dead wrong. And here's why. So who knows if we get that far to where that actually happens. But, that said, events are that important. We literally have to determine, do we have a constitution or don't we? In my view, we haven't since 1868. And the government in Washington, D.C. has been acting like it ever since, at the behest of their New York bankster bosses. This is what has to stop. And we will get it stopped. And a small subset of this is what's going on now with the Greater Idaho initiative in Oregon. They realize it, although probably not without having as much understanding of the subject matter as I do. But they could get the house put in order in Oregon if they just changed the racial representation and got a larger amount of people in there and more representation in the suburban counties, and perhaps in some cases a super majority to pass certain legislation instead of 50%, say 60 or even 2/3, and that would favor those states, those counties without a lot of population. I get that, maybe a little unfairly so, but given what's going on here, it is the way it is. So hold on, I gotta plug in forgot to plug this in. It's gonna go off here. Oh, my bad. Hold on. There we go. Anyway, everything can be fixed. We just have to have a mutual starting point. We all have to work together here. That's the key. Asians, Americans, Africans work together, cut out this divide and conquer bullshit with the civil rights that don't exist and were never designed to help anybody. And if they do, by the way, this is the problem I have with you LGBTQ types and civil rights advocates. What you're saying is we have rights, which you don't have, the quote unquote rights, aka government privileges, and they're only available by invoking the federal regional martial law rule and doing away with the states, the sovereign states, the common law, the judicial courts, trial by jury. That's the only way you get anything. And that's not only is that not much of a trade-off, those are acts of treason to the Constitution. And it would seem to me, knowingly or otherwise, if you commit acts of treason like that, you're demonstrating your unfitness to be members of the sovereign body politic of the nation and republic. And I'm here to tell you that's exactly what's going on. It is the way it is. I mean, those of you that think otherwise, go back to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and see if you can find an Asian or an African that signed it. I'd love to see it. They're not there. It was not the intent. That's not to say, by the way, that we get our system back, and we should, our sovereign states, and emphasis on local government. That makes things a lot easier to deal with. And now we don't rack up, among other things, all this massive debt that has to be, quote unquote, paid for in some way or another. A lot of which comes from traffic fines and criminal cases and this, that, and the other. That wouldn't need to exist if we didn't have all this massive trillions of dollars of quote unquote debt. So it's amazing when you start getting on the right track how much changes in a hurry. It really is. And by the way, I didn't get all this overnight either, hardly. I was a slow learner. And I was so damn stupid at the age of 19. What did I do? I tried to join the U.S. Marine Corps at the age of 19 at the height of the Tet Offensive. Talk about ignorant. That's world-class ignorant is what that was. Thankfully, I've come a long way from those times, and most of that was due to me not being taught a damn thing in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, most particularly. U.S. history, world history, civics, you name it. Stuff wasn't there, and we had no way to independently, or very little way to independently do it at the time. No computers, no nothing, and you didn't have that kind of tools like we do today that makes it a whole lot easier to do. But this should be in every curriculum and every school anyway, with a strong emphasis on it. And those of you out there, thinking that the critical race theory is a good thing, or all you woke people, I say to you, wake the hell up here. It is what it is. And if we're all slaves, how does it do any good to even try to put us lower on the scale than what you are? If we're all slaves, it is what it is. If they own all of us, there's not a damn thing you can do, at least as far as peaceful remedies are concerned. So that said, to you civil rights leaders out there, get over it. Get off the backs of your people, do something real for them. I'll be happy to help you if I see any serious approach to doing that. Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, to name a couple, and do some things that really help out. So that said, remember to send me an email. I'll send you information on my materials and some bonus materials to help get you up to speed here. And remember to subscribe, like the videos, tell your friends, get the word out. The quicker we do this and the more of us that do it, the quicker we get these bastards off our backs. Thank you.